Elco, the high watermark of quality.
And on the drum are different contacts, and there's 5 positions forward and 2 positions in reverse. And the way they get different speeds is they break the battery bank down into 2 sections. In this particular case, it'll be 2 36-volt battery banks. And they're either hooked in parallel, so you get more current, or they're hooked in series. And when it's done right, the draw from the batteries is always uniform, so you don't get any imbalance of the batteries, or some batteries being discharged more than others. So when they're in parallel, you can run for a longer period of time, but you'll run slower, obviously, lower voltage. In series, you'll run for a shorter period of time, but you'll run faster. Then in between, on the forward speeds, they have resistors in there too. And a resistor would be like a very lossy transmission in a car. It'd be like if you had a manual shift car that only had 3 speeds forward or 2 speeds forward. Well, you wanted to go at different speeds, and the motor would only run at 1 speed, you'd slip the clutch. Well, in a car, it would wear the clutch out, uses a lot of extra energy and things like that. But here the effect is that if you're running at, let's say, position 3 or 4 forward, and you want to get in between speeds, you work a resistor, and it just creates heat in the resistor, and your motor runs slower. It's rather wasteful, but back in the 1890s, that was the best technology that they had. There were no semiconductors or any very efficient controllers. To give you some idea, a resistor is 100% loss. So if you're slowing the motor down by 20% with a resistor, you're taking 20% of the energy, is throwing it off in the air as heat. In that controller over there, on the modern one, which I'll get to later, it runs about 98% efficient, the controller itself. So you can slow the motor down, and you're only losing maybe 1.5 to 2% of energy in the controller, compared to maybe 20% of the energy, or 15% of the energy, just to slow it down a little bit. But it was the best there was in restoring it, because they didn't last very long, the controllers and the resistors and such. So I know that a couple of boats running on the lake, I guess the St. Louis right now just runs 2 speeds forward and 2 reverse, and maybe sometime in the next year or 2 we'll get that running in all speeds. And there you go.
We're also going to have a race, right, Jeff?
What's that?
Yes, we're going to have a race
yeah.
at St. Louis.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be the big event in about a year, is racing in 2 boats on the lake. But this will have the full 5 speeds forward. The resistors are they're electrical resistors, but they're in cast iron boxes. You can look up and you'll see them up in the forward part with sliders on them and things like that. Well, the one slider is going to be hooked to a wheel. So while you're going along, you want to slow down a little bit, you slide the slider this way or that. And it'll slow the boat down, but it's just throwing power away. But again, that was the best they had. But the interesting thing was, electricity and the handling of electricity was relatively new, very new. So they took just a piece of copper, put it on another piece of copper, and held it down with a wood screw. Nothing in between or anything like that. And eventually, wood screws loosen up a little bit with time and temperature and moisture. Copper corrodes, and after a few years or X number of years, that joint didn't conduct electricity very well, and it would get very hot. So in restoring this, you can see sections in that wood drum, because everything's mounted on wood, where obviously they had a fire, and these pieces of wood been let in, fitted in. So in restoring it, we left all that there, because that's part of its patina of age and all. Could have made a whole new wood section in the center, but it's all original in here. And everything is right back to what it was, but we did one thing different. All of those joints, we cleaned up all the copper, And all of the joints, whether there's going to be a joint, we pre-tinned them with electrical solder, and then got them together with a spring clamp, and then took a torch, a propane torch, got it warm, and you'd see them go right together. Now, all of those connections are sealed, moisture sealed, and electrically enhanced because they're soldered together. And then it was painted black before, so it's painted black again. You can't see any of the solder, but whether the screw loosens up or not, that connection is not going to go bad. So the efficiency of that controller, the biggest part is that it won't fail, not because of heat. So that should be pretty good. And actually, when you're in certain running positions, there's about 4 positions where you don't have any resistance at all, it'll run pretty efficient. The motor itself is not as efficient as a newer motor, so it'll still be limited by that, but it'll give you good range. The way it's working out with this boat, because of the newer batteries, because we're getting more energy for the same space and all, it probably ran 6 to 7 hours originally, and I'm estimating this will run probably 16 to 18 hours on the charge, which is pretty darn good, you know, when you can consider how long an electric automobile can run on a charge. So you can really cover some distance, you know, with that. And it just click, 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 5 speeds forward, and then neutral, and then 2 in reverse. Any questions?
Is there a secondary steering, so if somebody's controlling it, you have to be up on the bow?
Well, Ernie Stiers, when he modified the boat, he had none of the resistors in the service except one, and very limited control. But he would control from the back of the boat with a push rod, you know.
So the whole distance?
He'd sit in the back, but you couldn't change. You couldn't go forward, reverse, or change the speed with the handle. It just changed it a little bit back there. I guess it was for fishing, you know. But it'd be dangerous. You know, you'd have to climb up the front of the boat to put it neutral and stop it and go in reverse and that kind of thing. But with the electronics like this here, you could do a remote station. But of course, back then with this, the whole control is power. Today, you control a signal. When you run the control over here, you're just handling milliamperes, thousandths of an ampere signal. Here, you're handling full motor current on that controller. And I haven't mentioned it to Steve because I didn't want to scare him, but the first time that he takes it out at nighttime when it's dark and he changes speed, he's going to, what's happening? It's going to look like a lightning storm underneath there, because it will spark, and if you open the door up, it's going to be pretty interesting. But it doesn't mean anything. You're just going to go splat, splat, splat. You know, you won't hear it, but you'll see sparks. And if you have
So I shouldn't bring any gas on the boat, Jeff? Like throw any gas cans on the boat or anything like that?
No, yeah. When you have your wife and the girlfriends and everything else on board, keep the door closed and scare the heck out of them. When you're out there alone at nighttime, leave it open. It'd be fun. I can't wait to do that. So that rod mounted someplace.
So your controls up there, those would be the original ones that were delivered from the factory?
Yeah. Yeah. This was a late in life aberration.
Okay.
So,
Also, I think when Elco was building boats in those days, people always had captains. It's only in our age where people go out and drive their boat. They had chauffeurs for their cars, or they had captains for their boats. And then after the war, when Elco started, people got out of the war, Elco's success, part of their success was people could buy boats that they'd skipper themselves, which, you know, they had the little cabin cruisers so people could take their family out. And that was one of the things that was sort of
that's
an innovation that Elco came with. People would drive their own boats.
That's a very good point, because Walter Weber, the fellow I mentioned who helped with ACDS, he had a 48-foot Elco cruiser and twin engines. And you know what an engine compartment was like? Well, right down alongside of each engine was a berth, a drop-down berth, because that's where the hired help slept. The owner slept in the cab, but the hired help slept down with the engines. Just like Peter said, they had people who go up there and run the boat. It's probably a warm place to be, though.
Yeah, in the winter.
When you're at anchor.
Yeah.
Elco, the high water mark of quality.